Yeah.
Good morning,
Alrighty.
everybody. This is Matthew, and good morning, Peter.
Good morning, Matt, and good morning, everybody. Great to have you along.
This is the live Datasheet review, 21st of the 2nd, 2015. Time seems to be flying through the year again. Second month of the year, and we've got lots to share with you today. Peter's going to be talking, obviously, and reviewing some of the races that he thought worthy of not just showing, but actually there's a little bit of learning to occur during those races. And also towards the end, Peter's going to be talking about trading with confidence and really sort of digging through the information, stuff that you should know but you need to apply. And as a philosopher once said, not too sure who it was, but to know and not to do is still not yet to know. So if you know this theory but you do not do the trading, you don't know. So Pete's going to be expanding on that idea to ensure that you're taking in all the indicators to pick up the wins and avoid the losses. So Peter, hopefully that's a reasonable enough introduction, and I've tried my own philosophy today, and I know you'll trump me with your own,
Good.
but I'll pass it over to you.
It's very. I would love to have known the author of that quotation, but I don't. So, no, very, very apt, Matt, and what you've just said is quite right. You've got to be proactive in the way that you acknowledge the information that's being provided. I mean, it's all very well to sit back passively and say, oh, well, yeah, I've got money gaps and I've got all these other things. But unless you're going in and being proactive about what you're seeing and what is being presented, then it's very hard to make a confident decision about what the outcome will be for you. And so the key is to be in order to be ahead of the game and be ahead of what and anticipating what is going to happen next as you go down towards the 1 minute mark. I believe it's most important that you're proactive about the way you go in and look, even to the extent of talking to yourself and saying, well, what am I seeing here? You know, where's the money going? What are the money gaps and the percentages and all that sort of thing telling me at this stage? And I think if you do that and you get into that sort of very dynamic, proactive way of doing things, then making confident decisions at the 1 minute interval is not the daunting task that maybe it once was.
Actually, Peter, if I could just jump in there, talking about preparation and getting your head right. Malcolm Jensen is a successful trader of the program with a strike rate of just a touch over 80%, and also a director of the support business. So everybody should know him, or at least know of him. And Malcolm has a list of questions he asks himself before every day's trading. You know, things like, am I prepared to sit here for X number of hours? Am I in the right headspace? Have I done my homework? He actually sits there and out loud asks himself questions. He has a notepad and writes these questions out for himself. It's, you know, Tiger Woods, although he hasn't won much since 2008, but maybe he needs to go back to philandering. But he would always approach the ball in a certain way, right foot, left foot, or left foot, right foot. I don't really watch golf, but he moves towards the ball, sets himself up. If he gets it wrong or trips or does something, he walks away, starts again. So that's exactly what Malcolm does. Every single time he approaches the day of trading, he asks himself those critical questions, and I actually got them off him the other day, and I'm happy to send them out to everybody. It's about the critical questions that he asks himself to get himself in the right headspace. So it's about preparation and for him and discipline. Sorry, Pete. And by the way, it was Confucius. Confucius is accredited as saying that. The quote.
Very good. Okay, well that's made me much more comfortable now, Matt. And I will go in and I will sort of Google Confucius and sort of get some other fine words of wisdom that we can sort of impart during future webinars.
I wonder what he has to say about horse racing software.
I don't know. It would be interesting.
Yeah, that's
anyway,
right.
we'll see if we can sort of find something to adapt to that. But anyway, all right, let's get underway with the more serious elements of today's activities. And and we'll go through these races. Now, I guess the theme today, the thread today, is about confident trading. And at the end, I'm going to show you a race right at the very end where there could be optional choice, as to what you're going to do. And the most important thing is to be, as I said before, is to be on top of the information, be proactive, prioritize the information, and then according to that priority, I guess you must be confident in the decision that you make about whether you're going to trade or not. That's the key to it. But before being I suppose the precursor to making confident decisions is to be comfortable that you've reviewed and prioritised all the information to your satisfaction. That's the key. And of course that means that you've got to be thoroughly conversant with the processes that govern selection making with this. So as I said to somebody earlier in the week, when you start looking at live data, it's no good sort of having bits of paper pasted around the wall with guidelines and things like that on them, because you haven't got time to think about that. When you start reviewing live information and when you start trading, it's all got to be intuitive. It's all got to be up in your skull. And so preparation, as Matt said, is vital. All right, so let's get underway. The first race is SRO2. And of course, we're looking at a possible megafecta. As you can see, $1.80 favourite, big money gap associated with the favourite. If we look at the support, the money support for the favourite, it's extremely consistent all the way along, right down to the 1 minute mark, relative to the rest of to the money allocations to the rest of the field. Now, I guess. So therefore, if we go back and let's have a look at this, I think the win dividend remains stable at $1.80, but I mean there's nothing wrong with that over several intervals, and that sort of reflects that consistency of money support for that particular favourite number 5. So given that the trifecta pool is well above the minimum requirement of $8,000, we'll trade megafecta and of course bring the selections for second down to number 2, satisfying that 80% coverage requirement, and then the third place selections go all the way to the bottom. So that's a pretty, you could say that's almost an archetypal optimal coverage in a megafecta situation. You've got a considerable number of options for second place. You've got 3 clearly defined levels of money support, and of course third place already stitched up. So all you've got to do is get the first and second, and certainly the money support for the favourite here would suggest that the chances of number 5 winning the race are pretty strong, and of course that's exactly what happened here. So. And it is a race at Rose Hill. You might remember we looked at a possible megafecta a week or fortnight ago, a couple of fortnights ago, and we chose against megafecta simply because it was the first race at at some country meeting, Stony Creek or somewhere. Here we're dealing with Rose Hill, which is the major one of the major metropolitan race venues in Sydney. So without, and you can see, obviously it must be a pretty significant venue, because even at that early stage at 1:45 p.m. New South Wales time, you've got this level of money support in the trifecta pool. So without hesitation, we'll go megafecta here with 24 combinations, and that gets us underway with a nice early winning opportunity. Righto, let's go to BRO2 next. Now, once again in trifecta, you can see that the top 3 runners are not holding the full 70% component or cumulative money, but I think that the level of concentration of money for this group of 3 runners consistently here, 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 which of course creates this quite sizable money gap of 2.05, which is considerably bigger than the minimum requirement of 1.7. Even though we're not holding the full 70% of the money, we're holding 68.88%, which is between 67.5 and 70. And so I guess all the indicators, the relevant indicators here, are suggesting that applying a percentage allowance for second would be more than acceptable, because the money supports it. The money, that consistent money, dominant money support for the top 3 runners has created that sizable money gap that falls within the required limit, and the percentage is within that 67.5 to 70% range. So more than justifiable to apply the percentage allowance here for second place, which gives us a trading opportunity, and we take advantage of the opportunity to apply the allowance. And you can see here that's backed up by what we see in percentage return, because the 3 are obviously the runners that are attracting very serious money in the late stages of the race.
So guys, if I could just jump in there, Pete. Over the last couple of months we've been introducing the idea of using the percentage return screen as a reinforcement for a strong selection in trifecta. Pete, do you just want to just review that just briefly? I know that most people on this call, and I see the same faces every week, and I really love that. But then there's a couple of people that may not have been here every week, who may not be entirely, like maybe Wayne, who's relatively new to the fold, and I can see a couple of people who have come back recently, back to trying to make the best out of the program. Pete, can you just go ahead and review the using the percent return as a reinforcement for a strong trifecta selection? Yeah. So use percent return as a strong indicator as trifecta. Is that what I said?
Yeah. See, so here we've got an option. You know, we've got a couple of options that we could follow, right, in trifecta. We could apply procedurally where, you know, it's allowable to apply the money gap the percentage allowance for second. If we apply the basic money gap selections, we'd be bringing second all the way down to the bottom as with third, which would rule the race out. So if I just go out of this race, let's just go back to where we were, and I'll unlock. Okay, so that's the. So if we're looking at it from, you know, from scratch, if we applied the basic money gap process, we'd be bringing second all the way to the bottom like we would with third. But for the reasons I've stated, we have another option to trade in this race by applying the second place percentage allowance, like so. Now you could say, in this instance, in trifecta, I think the money support is pretty clear cut. And that's reinforced when we go to percentage return, because in percentage return, you're getting a perspective or a money profile that very much relates to what's happening at the business end of things, namely over the last 5 intervals leading up to the 1 minute interval. And so you can see here that the separator, the dominant separator at the top of the field, is in the same location as the separator is in, or the money gap is in trifecta. So by using percentage return, you can, I guess, it's a means by which you can confirm which option is the most appropriate to follow or the most justifiable to follow. If you were to go into percentage return and you thought, right, okay, it certainly looks like I can trade with the top 3 runners for first and second, looking at it from a trifecta point of view, but I go into percentage return and there were no separators until down to here, then you might think, well, over the last 5 intervals, the cumulative money was sort of shared pretty equally right down to that point. So maybe covering off just the top 3 runners, applying a percentage allowance wouldn't be as smart an idea as I first thought, just looking at it in trifecta. So it's just a way of, I suppose, of lending support to what decision is the most appropriate.
That's great, Pete. Thank you for that. I know that most people already know that, but I think it's worth going over these every now and then, these so-called basics, because they're not really covered in the initial training, and that's the value of these sessions, is because once the training is recorded, it takes a while for us to record and produce those videos, and then we can add to the knowledge base using these webinars, because they're a bit free form. I can ask questions, we can go backwards and forwards and hear that sort of stuff. One thing about...
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and one other thing too, if you were reviewing this, as I've recommended, ad nauseum, over the intervals from the 5-minute interval, you can see quite clearly that even right back at 3 minutes, you'd be thinking about applying the percentage allowance, because you'd be looking at the money profile and thinking, well, the money's pretty strong for these top 3 runners, big money gap, percentage not quite there, but maybe could get to up into the the allowance range, or maybe get to the full 70%. So, and when we go to the 2-minute interval, right, you can see we're edging closer to that sort of point where we can make a percentage allowance. So when we get down to the 1-minute interval, the percentage allowance becomes fully justifiable, and that's simply because there was consistent, strong money support for these top 3 runners that was dominant over the rest of the field. So with allowances, they're optional. They provide a level of flexibility to assist with selection making. Now, the allowances are there to be used only if you feel they're justified. If the thoughts are that even though procedurally the allowance could be applied, but the money support doesn't lend itself to that, well then the option of making basic money gap selections is the right one to fall back on. So you only apply allowances when they present as being fully justifiable, based on the money support, based on money gap location, and based on percentage, and you can get added endorsement of that course of action by referring to percentage return, as we just have done just before.
That's great. Right, and by the way, Pete, just want to let everybody know, for the people who haven't been here before, my job is not just to interrupt. My job is to curate any questions that you might have. So in the question box or chat box, I don't care how you communicate with me. You can flick me an email. I've got my email open as well. Ask the questions, and we'll get them answered. Our only goal is not to entertain each other, although we're good at that. Our cumulative hundreds of hours on the road together, travelling around, and cumulative hundreds of hours just sitting in each other's offices talking over the last...
Who cares what anybody else thinks?
No, we're having a lovely time. Pete's been with us for 10 years, so he and I got plenty of things to talk about. But my job here is to curate your questions and have them answered. And also, as I was saying, the only goal of us doing these every Saturday, committing to doing these every second Saturday, is to answer your questions. And this is not television, so you can actually interact. Also, during the week, if you want to ask a question or say, Matt, can you guys cover, just hit reply on that webinar at Trilogics. It'll come to me and Pete. I'll usually reply because Pete's got enough of his own emails to deal with. But just tell us what you want us to cover next week. If you think, I'd really love to get really deep into that percentage return versus trifecta thing, or I'd really love to know more about when I shouldn't be selecting mega factor, or whatever it is. Our goal is to provide you with the tools to make this a successful business. So if you've got a question, ask it, and we'll answer it.
Yes, exactly right. I endorse exactly everything that Matt's just said.
Excellent.
All right, so let's move
Carry
on to the next race, which is this one here. Now, I think if we go back to Troy, now I don't know what's going on here. There's a little bit of, anyway, we'll look at it in percentage return. As you can see, we are fully at license to trade with the top two runners here. We've got a strong favourite, and the group 1 and 6 is defined by a separator of 1.81, which is bigger than the minimum size required of 1.7. We have very clearly dominant cumulative money here. We have clearly dominant money support at 1 minute, back here, back here, back here, and of course, all importantly, those two runners are holding cumulatively more than 47.5% of the win pool in this race. So this would be justifiable as a trading race in percentage return with a selection of two runners as our group, given that the returns are going to be more than the minimum of 50%. All right, so moving on now to CR05. Now this is just a normal, I guess, stock standard basic money gap selection race in trifecta. Top 4 runners first, top 4 runners second, down to number 9 for third. There is I suppose, an option of dropping back to that level and applying a money gap allowance. Now it just depends, you know. I mean, I think that both options are acceptable depending on how you prioritise the information. If you looked at that and thought, okay, the money is starting to fall away at 1 minute, and based on that reduction of money support, I'll apply the allowance, that's fine. But if you look back and say at the 2 minute interval and said, well, no, the money was similar there, the money was similar there, it's pretty close here, so blow it, I'm not going to apply the money gap allowance. I just think I'll stick with the basic money gap selections and bring and work one further down to the recognised money gap. So it's either or. I mean, you can either have 48 combinations or 36. It depends on how you prioritise the information. Either is acceptable based on your personal assessment of what's presenting. All right, so okay, now this next race, of course, is percentage return, and this is an example where we could think about trading against the weak favourite, number 8. As soon as you see a favourite holding a percentage in the teens, that is less than 20%, it can be rated as a pretty flimsy favourite. I mean, there is generally, you'll generally find that there'll be a group of runners that's pretty money competitive in the same area as your favourite, and if we go back to the 2 minute interval here, you can see that the favourite was at the top of the field, and then we moved to the 1 minute interval. Of course, it dropped one position. So that's a further indication of the weakness of this favourite. In other words, this favourite is losing market support as we edge towards the moment of decision. And we have already defined by the separator at number 3 a group of 2, 1, 5 and 3 that's money competitive with our weak favourite. We can see that there are no numbers in the WUP column for the favourite. We can see that the favourite has got a positive value. we can also see that our group, our potential trading group 2, 1, 5 and 3 is holding more than the required 47.5 minimum cumulative money. So this would be an instance where trading with the group of 4 runners against the weak favourite would be more than acceptable. And even though in the revised or upgraded manner with which we analyse data and percentage return, in most instances now we're eliminating or we're including favourites in groups, whether they be weak or strong. Don't be afraid to trade against weak favourites when all the information very much supports that course of action or lends itself to that course of action. Don't think that you've got to avoid trading against weak favourites at all costs. That's not the case at all. It's a case of being selective. It's looking at all the information, as I've just said, weighing up the pros and cons and saying, yeah, well, this is an instance where I can go ahead and do it, and I'm quite happy to do it. And by trading in this race, of course, you've had a winning situation, with number 2 being the ultimate first place getter. All right, next race, where are we? Okay, here's just a straight up banker trifecta, $1.70 favourite. We're selecting, singling out the favourite to come first on its own. Of course, very, very clear-cut selections for the minor placings. Gives us more than optimal coverage, field coverage. 30 combinations, which falls within the reduced minimum of level of 450, falls within the minimum level of 42 sorry, I'll say that again, I'm getting a little confused here. 30 combinations is less than the maximum required level of 42 combinations. Remember that with banker trifecta and megafecta, there are 2 adjustments that we're making to the basic money gap selection process. A, we're reducing the maximum number of trifectas created from 60 to 42. B, we're covering not 70% of the money to a red money gap per second, but 80% of the money to a red money gap per second. And of course, with megafecta, you've also got the added adjustment of the prize pool minimum size, up from $5,000 to $8,000. So I suppose it's a good time to mention that if you create a number of combinations, for instance, when you're dealing with banker or mega, that falls between 42 and 60, you will not get a red button, not get a red combinations button, because remember that the guidelines, these guidelines are set to what is required for the the basic money gap process to be applied, and that means that the maximum number of combinations is 60. So anything between 42 and 60 will not present as a red button, red combinations button. So you've got to make sure that you check to see numerically how many combinations you've created to make sure that it doesn't fall in that sort of no man's land range. Okay, here's another banker trifecta, of course. Now, I suppose procedurally we could stop there in this particular race. $1.60 favourite, we're singling it out to come first. We're covering, if we cover the required, I suppose that would be the procedural coverage that we'd look at first. We're covering 80% of the money down to there for second, to the money gap. We're covering for third down to this level. But really speaking, that gives us 4 combinations. Now that's way too thinner coverage. I mean, the idea is to balance risk against return here, and you know, for starters, you're leaving yourself wide open to success, minor placing success occurring in the lower areas of the field by doing that. And you've got plenty of combinations to play with. I mean, with banker and megafector, given that we're only covering one runner to come first, you don't want to sort of feel that you've got to minimise the selection making if it's indicated that perhaps a few other extra selections would be a good risk minimisation strategy. So here, even though that would be our starting point as far as coverage concerned, I think if we look at the money profile, you can see that there's similarity of money here for a start. And so in order to give us a little bit of broader coverage into the lower sections of the field, that would be a more appropriate selection outcome. And if we go to percentage return, oh no, we don't sort of get much help there. But it's just common sense. Rather than sort of leave ourselves wide open to, and rather than elevate our risk factor in order to maximise our profit, it's far better to mitigate the risk by giving yourself extra coverage in a logical and common sense way, with a view to accepting a smaller profit in the event of a winning outcome. So it's just, I guess, as I said, it's an exercise in risk versus return, and I think a certain sort of common sense element prevails here too. I mean, why would you stop here like that and leave the whole bottom of the field exposed? Far better to give yourself some extra coverage, minimise the risk a little bit, and you've still only created 20 combinations. So don't forget that you've got that option in both banker trifecta and megafecta. I suppose it's a type of, it's a form of optimisation, I guess. And optimisation doesn't mean covering extra runners for their own sake. Optimisation is saying, well, what's the most adequate, most logical and most sensible coverage based on what I'm seeing? All right, moving on to the next one. Now here again, I think you can see at the 1 minute interval, based on this level of money support here, clear definition of dominant money support here, the big money gap, the percentage, well, not quite 67.5. I guess if we're going to apply the procedures rigidly, our selection should come down to that level there, and that would rule the race out. But I guess for anybody that was a person with experience that had been trading for quite some time, they might look at something like that and say, well, because of the very, very strong and clearly defined money support for these top 4 runners reflected in that quite large money gap, which is considerably bigger than the minimum requirement of 1.7, I'm prepared to make a very small concession on the percentage in order to give myself a trading opportunity and take advantage of a winning outcome that hopefully is reflected in that that strong money support, particularly at the 1 minute interval. And
sorry, Pete, I just wanted to jump in there. The guys, Pete just misspoke just slightly there. It was 1.5 minimum. I just don't want anybody changing their rule set to be 1.7.
Yeah, no.
Sorry,
when you're applying the money, when you're applying the percentage allowance per second, you're looking for a minimum requirement of 1.7.
Ah, see, Peter didn't misspeak. I misheard. Sorry about that, everybody. There you go. A little bit of learning for little old Matthew here.
Yeah. So it's I suppose to reinforce the need to justify making the allowance with the level of money support that presents in the money, as far as the money profile is concerned. Because if you don't have a level of support for a group of runners that's sufficient to produce a money gap of 1.7 or bigger, then obviously applying the allowance would not be the acceptable way to go anyway. So it's just a sort of a way of giving some impetus to perhaps applying, satisfactorily applying the percentage allowance per second. But as soon as you see a gap that's hugely bigger than the 1.7, like this one is, then that is that generally reflects the fact that the money support for the group above that's defined by the gap is pretty strong, which it is here at the 1 minute interval.
Thanks. That's great. Thank you very much for that. Look, it's interesting that I even missed that. So it's not unreasonable for people to miss these little things, and that's the true value of these conversations, these webinars, is to actually see and to remind ourselves of that. If you're going to apply an allowance, it's got to be 1.7. It's not 1.5. Really good stuff. And Richard, I've got a couple of questions lined up here. Well, not for you to answer, Pete. Yes, Richard, I'll be putting this up and emailing the review out to everybody. And thank you, Chris. I've been watching that as well, Chris. So yeah, carry on, Pete.
Yeah. So this is a good example. I mean, and I stress that for anybody that's just become a new client or they're just starting out, I wouldn't be advocating applying the percentage allowance here. I think that you stick strictly to be pedantic about it and say, well, okay, it's not 67.5, it's not above 67.5, therefore I don't trade it. Simple as that. But anybody with a little bit of trading under their belt might, on occasion, based on their overall assessment of what's presenting, make a small concession, such as the percentage here, on rare occasions. But I wouldn't advocate doing it as a standard practice. So you've got to, and I guess that's what it gets back to what I was saying earlier about, trading with confidence. And in order to trade with confidence, you've got to weigh up all the pros and cons. And if you go to percentage return to get some sort of added confirmation, we do have that confirmation here, because you can see that the separator at the same level is even bigger. So it reflects that the late money support for those top three runners, particularly down at the 1 minute mark, is very strong comparative to the rest of the field. So the separator size in percentage return is 2.78. The money gap size in trifecta is 2.41. So I would think that, as I said, for anybody that's has a bit of experience in trading, this would be an occasion where making that very small percentage concession would be quite acceptable and understandable. But certainly it shouldn't be mainstream practice, particularly if you're just starting out. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what's causing this, but I'll have to have words with I'll have to consult with my technical guru Chris Leslie on this. I don't know why in Trifecta it's doing that, but we want to look at it in percentage return anyway. All right. We have our favourite, which is a weak favourite, number 1. Now, we do have a separator here of 1.7, bigger than 1.7, as we can see, but of course the top 2 runners are not holding anywhere near the 47.5% of the money. And if we look over here anyway at the money profile, it wouldn't present as logical to be choosing the top 2 runners as our group based on this the money being injected for number 6, which is well and truly superior to the money for these 2 runners, particularly at 1 minute. So the money profile and of course the level of percentage is very definitely telling us that the appropriate trading group here has got to be the top 3 runners, if anything. And of course, trading with the top 3 runners gives us a return above the minimum requirement of 50%, and so that's exactly what the outcome was for this particular race, PR06. Okay. AR06. Now this is a mega factor opportunity or presents as a mega factor option. As you can see, very clear cut at 3 minutes, money starts to build, and look at the money support for this favourite at the last 2 intervals relative to the rest of the field. I mean, if we take this back, you can see back at 3 minutes, the money, the win dividend for the favourite was $2.40, so well and truly out of the mega factor range. But because of the enormous support garnered for that favourite at 2 minutes, and then backed up at the 1 minute, of course the win dividend has plummeted into the lower end of the mega factor range. Huge money gap associated with the favourite. There's your optimal coverage. 80% of the money down to there. I mean, we could stop at that level there, but that means we're only covering 2 runners for first, 2 runners for second to take out second place, because we're expecting the favourite to win, so the favourite can't come second as well. So rather than just leave ourselves with that sort of skinny coverage down to that point there, or covering like that, which would be, I suppose, the procedural coverage, 80% of the money to a red money gap for second, 90% for third, that's far, far too lean a coverage. I mean, you're just leaving yourself wide open to failure, given that minor placing runners can come from further down the field. So a more sensible, optimal coverage would be to say, well, might as well give myself at least an extra runner for second, and let's bring third place down into, so it sort of extends down into the lower section of the field to some degree. I mean, these runners we can leave out. I mean, I've got no issue with somebody saying, well, blow it, I'll bring it right down to there, for instance. It just depends on how you want to prioritise the information. But I think that gives us optimal coverage. That's a nice balanced sort of coverage for first, second and third, and gives us a worthy mega factor to trade in. And as you can see, by adopting that sort of logical and common sense approach and just covering off, minimising that risk by giving ourselves that just slightly extra coverage beyond the basic procedural coverage, we've picked up a winning outcome that would have lost had we not done that, with number 5 being the second place getter. So even though you might have sacrificed a little bit of potential profit, you've ended up walking away with profit rather than walking away in loss. And that's what balancing risk against return is all about. And now BR06, which is the final one we'll look at, there were other races on this day, but for some reason we must have had some sort of glitch, and the program must have shut down at some stage, unbeknownst to us. So that's why there's some green buttons down the bottom there. Once again, we'll have to have a discussion about why that might have occurred on this day. But anyway, nonetheless, here we have an example where the selections in trifecta would, of course, rule the race out. But we go to percentage return, and we can see quite clearly that trading with the top two runners here is going to be more than a smart decision. I mean, look at the enormous money support cumulatively here. Look at the quite dominant support at 1 minute, back at 2 minutes, back at 3 minutes, back at 4 minutes, all the way along. I mean, this race was setting up for a trading opportunity with these top two runners. The group of two runners is holding 52.38% of the money. Both runners have got numbers in the WUP column. Both runners are negative in the UDIF column. All the indicators, money profile, location of the required separator, supporting information in the WUP and UDIF column, and of course the all-important percentage, all point to trading with 2 and 4 as the most appropriate and justifiable trading option in this situation. And so that sort of and it's not surprising that we've had a winning outcome. So I guess in lots of these instances, if you're reviewing races, as I'm encouraging you to do, very often there are times where you're eager to trade. You know, you're sort of champing at the bit to get the thing accepted by the TAB, because you just have a sense that all the indicators are telling you that the likelihood of a winning outcome is a very, very good one. And this would be a good example in this percentage return situation. Okay, now I'm going to go up and bring up this particular race just to conclude. Now, if we looked at this just at the 1 minute interval, you would think, okay, strong favourite, number 3, 3 and 4, got to be a group. Look at the size of the separator, much bigger than 1.7. Looks like all the money action is for the top two runners here. Cumulatively, we've got the percentage that's above the minimum requirement of 47.5. You know, strong money support at the 1 minute mark here for that group. But if we review it, or we go back to say 3 minutes and look at it in that analytical way, cumulative money is strong, but the support here is not so strong. I mean, the favourite's getting a lot of money support, but runner 4 is not sort of, you know, I suppose, carrying its weight, if you like, in that group of two runners. You've got similar money support further down the field here. We go to the 2 minute interval, and the same situation prevails. The strong money support for the favourite carries over, but here even more clearly, you can see that there's competitive money action for runners further down the field with this particular runner number 4. And, of course, at 2 minutes we don't have a trading option because the separator has disappeared. Now, all of a sudden at the 1 minute interval it reappeared, albeit very strongly. But this would be a situation where you could think to yourself, well, procedurally, I could trade in this, no question, based on what I'm seeing at the 1 minute mark. But it's 4 o'clock, it's a race at Newcastle, the information is somewhat conflicting that I've seen over the last series of intervals. Is it worthy of my input here? And maybe there would be a question mark hanging over its worthiness as a trading opportunity. And if you decided, well, you know, it's late in the afternoon, Newcastle, and it's not sort of like a major metropolitan meeting, I've traded, I've made some reasonable money today. Do I want to risk some of that by trading in this when some of the information is somewhat conflicting? And so if you decided to opt out of the race, which I would think would be the appropriate thing to do, in this instance you've would have avoided losing some money as a result. So it's very much reflects the fact that it's important to review all the indicators and not just look at it at 1 minute, weigh it up over that series of intervals down to the 1 minute mark, and based on that sort of continuity of review, make your final decision in a confident fashion. And if you're going to trade, trade confidently. If you decide not to trade, then don't trade equally as confidently. And I think if you adopt that sort of proactive approach with your selection making, you'll find that your results will receive a boost accordingly. So we certainly hope that's the case. So that sort of brings it to the end today. I hope everybody's taken away something of benefit from today's review. And of course, as Matt has indicated, it will be available for further review in the support portal. So that pretty much brings it to an end for my part today, Matt.
Thanks, Pete. Appreciate that. So some good little notes that I've made there, and as always, I appreciate the people who are Chris and Richard and people like that, and Doug, who are interacting with me in the question box there. Really appreciate it. I'm learning all the time. People who are hopefully here are learning all the time and getting some value out of it. But what I want to know is, excuse me, what do you guys want to hear about? What do you guys want to understand more of? And what is how can we serve you better in these sessions? That'd be great for you to send me some feedback on that. If you think they're brilliant, tell me. Pete's got a strong ego, but I'm a bit fragile, so I need you to tell me that we're doing a good job. But in all seriousness, please go ahead and let us know what we can do to provide you with with the day that's going to present you with the greatest level of value. So on that note, I'll sign off, and thank everybody for your time. I'm going to convert this and put it up onto YouTube and get it out to you as soon as we can today. Chris now works on a Saturday, everybody, and so does Mike. So we have a full complement of staff for your technical issues, if there are any. And so we're available to serve on Saturday being the most busy day for trading. So get into it, analyse your races, and take a considered approach.
Yeah, so I will say farewell to everybody today, and I will also remind everybody that we are reverting back to Saturday webinars exclusively.
Oh, yes.
Our experiment with Wednesday probably could have been a little bit confusing for people, losing track of when the webinars are going to be held. Is it this Wednesday or is it next Saturday? Or so it will be religiously every Saturday fortnight, just to make it consistent.
Exactly.
So thanks very much for your attendance, everybody. Have a great weekend, and we'll look forward to you joining in with us in a couple of weeks' time.
Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye, Matt. Bye, everyone.